Hey, all you outliers, you nobodies, you rare birds from Western Australia to Central Oregon. Welcome to the UU, a podcast where we, peering through theological lenses, assess the empty abyss into which church and culture are now being plunged. Thanks for joining me. As the Pope of Podcasting, I take your download seriously, but I especially take your intellect seriously. And some of you will be happy to know I'm recording today's video with my shirt from high school. I worked with this shirt at a gas station in Bend, Oregon, mobile mobile gas station back in high school. But on the video, the audio portion of this show, I do a spoof here at this point in the show about the new Neo Jefferson Bible, a Bible that redacts and edits out all of the things that progressives can't stand. And they end up with a Bible for sale that's 11 pages long and it only costs $69 plus shipping and handling. But you'll have to go listen to the audio version to hear that one. On the personal front, oh man, I had a heart stopper of an experience the other day. Tell me you didn't get to meet Drake? No, ma'am, and that wouldn't stop my heart anyway. No, this'll be far more mundane than I normally cover here on the UU. In the front of my home, I have 6 rose bushes. A couple of them are red floribundas. They're just explosions of color. They get so many blooms on them that the stems can't support them. So to prop them up, to help them so you can see their gorgeous display of crimson out from the street, I used some H stakes that I had in the garage. I took them, I stuffed them down in the ground, and I leaned the stakes up on them so that the roses were beautifully apparent. But then the other day, I was out there trimming this and checking that, and I leaned over to see the base of my one single white rose, and an exposed metal H stake poked my right eye. Now, fortunately, I was wearing my glasses, and all that happened was that I got a 1/4 inch scratch on my eye. But if I hadn't been wearing those glasses, I would have lost my right eye. That's how hard I hit it, smack. And the instant I stood up, I was really close to being nauseated. My heart was racing because I realized how hard I hit that. I would have just poked my right eye out. And I stood there praying, Holy, 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 Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Oh, thank you, God, that I didn't just lose my right eye. It was that scary. So, my UU friend today, if you're going out to work in your yard, please put some kind of eye protection on. Even if you don't think you need to, put on some kind of eye protection. Because holy, 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 Abba, 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 if I hadn't been wearing my glasses, my life would have changed in the flash poke of an eye, literally. Here's a Noza personal story. We just went to the beautiful Oregon coast for 5 glorious days. It was so cool there. It was in the 60s. Here it was in the 90s, but over there it was in the 60s. And a couple evenings while we were sitting around the campfire, it was even misting down on us. It was just wonderful. But one day we were sitting in the campground with family and friends, just sitting around the campfire, which wasn't lit in the middle of the day. We were sitting there yakking. And up walks a stranger, a woman, probably in her late 30s, super skinny, kind of disheveled. And uninvited, but we weren't in any way keeping her out, she walks up and sits down in one of our lawn chairs. We sat there for 10 minutes having a pretty pleasant conversation, a nice chit chat. And when I remarked how beautiful the Oregon coast is, she agreed. And then when I added, but the state now is not at all what it was like when I was growing up. It was beautiful and clean then, and it was filthy and overrun and ugly now because of leftist policies. She went ballistic. And she started going on the attack. She went from being pleasant and affable to energized and rabid and really coming at us hard. And so from that point on, for about 15 minutes, we were trying to have a shared conversation with her, the four of us and she. But for her, no, it was a chance for some 15 minutes of non-stop talking, her voice raised, machine gun style of rhetorical attack. She didn't want me or any of our group to get in a word edgewise. Now, my approach in those situations is to ask questions. Why do you believe that? In what is that position based? Why do you think it's the way it is? What statistics do you think help to account for that? Because I'm not interested in a shouting contest. I don't think those are fruitful. So again, I like to ask questions. Questions can lead to an honest exchange. Questions can be invitations. Questions go to sharing, but questions also can expose doubts. And those doubts can lead to internal change. Well, at least possibly. But the point that got her red hot was when she asked the four of us, now, you're not like those who believe the public schools are coaching kids to become gay and transgender, are you? And when in unison the four of us said, yes, actually, she went bonkers. She told us we were brainwashed. For some reason, in her stream of consciousness rant, when you're drunk or a high on drugs of some sort, it's not very conscious. She blurted out that she didn't believe in God. She said that she was going to take her 9-year-old daughter and have her turned into a boy. She told us to stop reading social media. And then her final big argument in her mind was, no one can help who they love. You can't help loving the person you love. And of course, we all disagreed. We all make daily choices about what we like and love or don't. And love is as much a choice as it is an emotional feeling. But it's interesting, my listener, and I have 3 points to share for you from this conversation. And the reason that I convey this is not that we had an emotionally charged conversation, but that I want to think with you about how to engage in these kinds of conversations. And the first point, A, was that her style of argument was 100% typical of progressive argumentation today. It was ad hominem to the man. It was very personal. Now, because I taught college for 25 years and endured those kinds of attacks, especially in ethics classes, I wasn't unused to this. But she, as the conversation went on, got increasingly vile in her language, told us she was binary, told us she wanted to do the bleep this and the bleep that to some sexual weirdness to one member of our group. And it got really gross. And my point is that's pretty typical of progressive argumentation. It goes ad hominem and they start attacking you instead of ideas or arguments or lines of thought and commitments. Secondly, in this conversation, she was so self-unaware. It was sad. Twice I said to her, can you hear yourself? You walked into a camp full of strangers and you're talking to us this loudly and this accusatory. It was, like I say, embarrassing and sad and unnecessary. She was so sadly self-unaware. And again, because of her speech patterns, we were all pretty certain that she was blitzed on something. We agreed intuitively together, recognized together that prolonging the conversation was pointless. At some point, you got to see, is this going anywhere? Is this going to bear any fruit? And my third takeaway, which is related, is that you can only do so much in a one-way conversation. You can only do so much when the other person is just dominating the conversation, won't let you get in a word edgewise. At some point, you have to determine how you're going to end that conversation. You want to try to plant a seed if that's all you can do and move on, because there's no exchange transpiring. There's no in good faith disagreement that's taking place, so you need to find a way to politely end it. And my wife, thankfully, found a way to end it. She said, I'm sorry, but our friends are only here for one more day, and we really don't want to spend our time talking and arguing like this. And her saying that finally prompted our stammering visitor to get up and leave. All the while, she worked super hard to get in her last word. It was so sad. But we now live in an anti-truth era of history, and so people don't know how to disagree honestly or disagree to disagree. But sometimes you got to pray, Holy Spirit, give me love and wisdom and discernment and grace. And in fact, in the rest of today's show, I'm going to have more to say about thoughtful, careful, ideological conversations. But first, my new listener, there's a UU webpage. You can find all 322 episodes there. And there's a new unfeature. There's now a page a link where you can access the video versions of my show. You'll find that by clicking the extra material button. It's material with a plus sign on it. And if you click that links to episodes videos page, you can access all the ones I've been videoing and putting up there on Rumble and YouTube. Plus, I have a page for my all-time favorite books and favorite books of the last year or so, and you'll also find a link to UU gear. Tumblers, huge 40-ounce tumblers like this beauty right here. You can get that on that web page, and smaller tumblers like like this one back here, and the mouse pad above it. There are t-shirts and coasters, all of that at uncensoredunprofessor.com. Next, I want to share with you some cultural reflection. We are, as I record this, about 16 months from the general election of America's next president. That'll be held on Tuesday, November 5th in 2024. Now, I'm not convinced that 81 million, we ended cancer as we know it. No, thanks for ending cancer, Joe. I'm not sure 81 million will even make it to that date. Between his health and the constant stream this week of Hunter's friend talking about how Joe and Hunter were in the same room discussing business dealings together, all these ongoing revelations of 81 million having allegedly taken foreign bribes through his son, Hunter. Will the Democrats use that to finally run Joe off? I don't know. Well, I read in Rolling Stone that Hunter was fluent in Chinese by the age of 3. Oh, that's fascinating, ma'am. I didn't know that. Will the GOP have the courage to begin impeachment hearings? Probably not. But on the GOP side, Trump looks like a runaway. I doubt that he's going to fade from his enormous lead he has over all the other contenders. Well, that's if they don't find a way to lock him up and put him in solitary confinement before the election. And then there's Mike Pence. By everyone's testimony, he was an excellent vice president. By most Christians' testimony, he's a rock-solid believer. But I got to tell you, it's been hard of late to watch him. I listened to a radio interview of him where he defended the Trump's administration and their production of the coronavirus injections. He wouldn't admit that the jabs are causing blood clots or strokes or weird, rare kinds of cancer. He didn't offer any apology in the slightest. And, by the way, neither has Trump. I think he also needs to come out and tell us he was duped by the federal government powers, but I don't think he will because he's afraid he'll lose the middle. But then when Mike Pence was asked by Tucker Carlson, there's a war in Ukraine that is devouring American resources. So what do you think about all the American cities that are now in decline? And Pence answered, that's not my concern. Not my concern. You guys, it was hard to watch. I honestly felt bad for him. It was embarrassing. Here was a decent man looking like a dolt. I mean, American cities are in decline, and those are not a presidential hopeful's, concern. Queso sagrado. So for me, folks, Pence is a good exemplar of a nice Christian. And no, I'm not even pretending to know his heart. God bless Mike Pence and his walk with Jesus. But he's nice, unassuming, congenial, well-spoken, soft-spoken. He's openly Christian. And yet he's polling, Real Clear Politics says, at about 4% right now. Now, I don't want to seem unfair, but here's a genuinely nice Christian, and only 4% of registered Republicans say they'd vote for him. Now, there are many ways I could take this, not least of which would be that people generally, and Christians apparently, don't like passive leaders. They like strong leaders mostly, but Pence, he's nice. And across my 38 years of being ordained, I met plenty of nice but feckless leaders. Leaders who have a position of power for some reason, church leaders even who are feckless. I met plenty of them, and that is spelled plenty. They collect their high-end salaries and do nada to speak truth to cultural breakdown. But man, they're so nice. I said this a couple years ago in an episode, but when I vote for president, yeah, I'd be tickled happy if that person were indeed a committed Christian. But I'm not voting for their theological frame. I'm not voting for their position on entire sanctification. I don't immediately care what their views are about the afterlife. I am voting for the person who will be the strongest leader on behalf of the Constitution, someone with courage, who believes in justice, who, since we're given a binary choice, right, someone who wants to limit the size and reach of the government, someone who may support the nuclear family or religious freedom or societal order or, for goodness sakes, Western civilization. But all of that, having to sift through all of that and exercise that kind of discernment, is called being an adult, or in Christianity we call it being a disciple, having to work through a world that's woven together with shades of gray. So finally, it might mean that I don't, in fact, vote for someone who's nice. Last week I presented 3 historic reasons why evangelicals are not people of the mind. They don't use their intellects to love God or to present the gospel. So today I thought I'd follow up with some great questions to ask when you're in a thoughtful, honest, open, or like us on the Oregon coast, when you find yourself suddenly thrust into a heated, maybe perhaps philosophical, cultural conversation. Or when you're in a conversation where someone's trying to get over on you. Questions can be a kind of pre-evangelism tack. And just a few quick qualifiers. Ask your questions in sincerity. Just ask questions. Don't ask them in order to later jam through your own answers, which, again, with the conversation at the woman, I wasn't jamming my answers through in that one tiny bit. You got to be comfortable with just letting your conversation partner think. Maybe get them to be introspective. Let them know that you're willing to listen, that you're not just there to yammer. Because questions can help them see glaring gaps in their own worldview. And by the way, clear back in my first year of doing the show, episode number 19, I did with my father-in-law, Dennis McNutt. It was a really good show on how to ask good questions. Again, that's UU19. Go and check it out. Oh, and then please know, because her book has been so stellar for my thinking in this Secular Sacred series, I'm drawing the grist for these 3 or 4 questions from Nancy Pearcey's book, Total Truth. I'll draw the top level general nature of the question from her and then unpack them by myself. Her book, Total Truth, is available for $21 paperback at Christian book distributors. And one of the things that I like about all these questions is you don't have to be Einstein. They're not that complex. In fact, their simplicity probably helps to make them more forceful and provocative. But like I say, asking questions is more of an invitation. It's less intrusive, less of an assault than making direct assertions anyway. Here we go. First, ask them, what do you believe caused the origin of life? What caused the earth to be, the universe to exist? And again, you don't even have to proclaim your own answer to that. I mean, if they invite you, go ahead, that's wonderful. But you don't even have to give your own answer. What caused life? It's a critical question because everyone in life lives in light of what they believe to the original cause, a source of life, right? For example, billions of folks live as though their family, especially their ancestors, are the key to life, the connection to universal beginnings. They think that's the link to timeless wisdom. So it might be good to ask, where did your ancestors come from? How'd they gain their own wisdom? Why do you give them authority? Like I say, those kinds of things go to roots and origins. Or here in the West, tens of millions of people live as though nothing is the cause of life in the universe. And so we're not surprised that people who live life in light of nothing are characterized by ennui and depression and listlessness. Or if they think, as this series is unpacked at length, if they think, man, and if you can get them to talk about what they're thinking, don't ask what they feel, ask what they're thinking. Make them move to the intellect and logic and reasoning, deduction, coherence, thinking, not feeling. If they think that evolution caused it all to happen, if they think that that is the source of life, ask if they're living their own lives according to random chance. Random chance produced the universe. Is random chance guiding every asset, every affect, every aspect of their own lives? Ask them. Do they think that? Probably not. Or ask them a simple question. Do you think the sun is going to rise tomorrow? Why? What's the cause for that regularity? Random chance? I'll bet most people won't go to random chance on the sun rising. Get them to acknowledge there are laws and forces and patterns at work in nature that need to be accounted for. Why is it that we can depend on those laws? Go to origins. That's a huge way to drive a conversation. Second, ask questions about solutions, right? We're all born into a fire. I forget where we were last night, and I saw a young child being held by her mom, and I thought that baby is going to endure a life of frustration and pain and suffering. She didn't start the fire. Billy Joe said we didn't start the fire. We're all born into this same mess. How do we get out? What is the solution? And thinking again first from a Far Eastern perspective, many billions think the way out is through meditation and contemplation and stillness. So they're big on meditation and yoga. And I've talked in shows past about the benefits of doing yoga and stretching and breathing. I think Christians way overreact to yoga as a physical discipline. It's the philosophy of Hinduism and Buddhism that can lead you astray and detract, but yoga is not a big deal. So ask them, why is stillness so important? If the whole planet practiced yoga, would we end the war? Would we end the polarization? Why or why not? Is yoga and quietness and stillness a big enough answer? Is inner peace going to solve all our problems? And again, who's against inner peace? Not me. But is self-generated inner peace what is finally going to save the human race? Is that how we're going to get out of the mess? Is that sufficient? Or here in our POMO Western culture, tens of millions, especially if they're 40 years and younger, they now believe it's the government that is going to finally get us out of this plight. So you need to ask them, okay, so where in human history do you see the government as having ended all of people's problems? Or ask them, what gives you such faith in government? Isn't government just the coming together of a whole bunch of people, the shared efforts of people who each have their own flaws? So why government? How government? Because nowhere in history has government brought about a societal utopia. Nada. And of course, if they ask you and you're a believer, then you can say, look, we're all fallen. We need a savior. We can't save ourselves. We don't have it in us. So there's another question. How do we get out of this mess? Here's a third question, and it's a beauty. Why the need for morality? Does it really work if we all embrace the live and let live policy? Does it really work as long as it doesn't hurt anybody that it should be allowed? Because how would we define hurt? Physically? Economically? Existentially? Relationally? Why is there such a penchant all around the planet for morality? And who gets to define right or wrong? Because honestly, I think you guys, in private conversation, you're going to find very few folks who espouse a kind of rank cultural relativism. And if they do espouse something like that, ask them. And I've asked this in class, and the students didn't like it, but it would make them think. Are some cultures immoral in their treatment of women? Why? Why not? Are some cultures on the planet immoral to hold that some tribes are superior and others are inferior? And if competing cultures hold different moral perspectives, what do we do when they clash? What if 90% said, no, we're all going to adopt this position, and then there's 10% who say, no, we're not going to adopt that position. In fact, we're going to go to war over it. What do we do? Why? My point is, morality is giant grist for exposing worldview gaps. And then along with that, you can ask, why does the entire human race practice morality? And if your conversation partner pushes back, you can ask questions like, are you in favor of racism? Why or why not? And if they give you their answer and they're going to say they're not, then you can say, what's your foundation for that position? I mean, if this is all just a Darwinian survival of the fittest power game, then racism shouldn't be a problem for anybody. So get them to be introspective. Get them to be assertive enough to publicly articulate their position. And the doing that can help them to see the gaps in their own worldview. And if they don't do it in the conversation, maybe they will in their own quiet introspection and reflect on that later. And then finally, here's a really timely question as our society implodes. Is love real? Why or why not? Why is it that studies show constantly that children who are deprived of love, especially during those first formative 5 years, do not thrive over the course of their lives? Is love real? Do we need it? Why? And it's a question that not only goes to a deep and abiding quality of what it means to be created imago Dei, it also goes to the banal and intentionally pointless pomo, love is love attitude. Okay, what makes love love? Because if as the pomos are singing love is love, why can't someone go into a hospital nursery and begin killing babies, murdering newborns, shooting them up? After all, if they feel that doing that is loving, isn't that enough? What is love? Is love simply the way the human body reacts to its own chemistry? And if that's the answer, then aren't we just in love with our own chemical wiring and the feeling of being in love? And does anybody believe that's enough? Darwinian philosophy teaches us that altruism, doing good for others, is a kind of sneaky way to go around the corner and get what we really want, to manipulate people. But is it true that all people are really so secretly selfish? Do you really believe that hospital nurses don't genuinely want to do good for people they're caring for? Are they all secretly motivated by the need to be appreciated, so they're just doing good things so you'll say thank you to them? Or is there something deeper going on there? Ask them to define love. Get them to put their cards on the table that way. And if they, and we hope so, ask you to define love, then you can say matter-of-factly, not pushy, love is the reason for which God created us. God wants us to share that love with Him and with one another. Love is the heartbeat of God's own character. We crave love because we crave God. I hope you find these questions helpful. If you don't think they are, or if you have other ideas, email me at uncensoredunprofessor@gmail.com. My viewer, I am honored that you've taken the time to think with me. And until next week, please everyone go and turn on your beautiful God-given brains.